Hey, what's going on, everyone? It's Mike from Go Cell Phone Repair and our Thursday evening 6 o'clock live stream where we talk about tech stuff. If you haven't seen this before or been here before, thanks for joining. Over on my left, there are 6 topics, and we'll spend about 10 minutes on each one of these, and they are listed in chronological order. So if you want to see the sources for this information that we're discussing, it is down in the video description. You can click through, find out where this stuff is coming from. I'm not just making this up. Today we're going to talk about Verizon and AT&T, who have announced that they are going to stop selling your location data to brokers. California lawmakers accused of corruption after gutting net neutrality bill. I'm especially disappointed by that one because I am in California. Oppo's Find X ditches the notch and instead has a pop-up camera. Lots of skepticism as to how that's going to turn out, but you know, the phone looks pretty cool. Apple fined $6.6 million in Australia for not doing the right thing for their customers. Those are the simplest terms I can put that one in, which I don't understand why you would ever want to do something like that. Why you can't really trust negative online reviews. Kind of been talking about this for a while, and now we have some good reasons behind why you should be very skeptical about negative reviews and probably online reviews at all across the board. Apple, Samsung, and LG backing plans to replace car keys with smartphones. Got a couple more ideas about that one. We'll be talking about all this and more right after this. I just say right after this, right over this, right after that, right there. How's it going, Greg M? Good to see you. Tore off a strip of one of the major ISPs today on Twitter. If you want high-speed internet faster than 1 meg, $50 a month, you have to pay $80 for 15 meg connection. Great for seniors on a limited budget. Yeah, and we're going to start seeing some interesting things happen, I would imagine, in the near future when it comes to this whole thing. And I want to actually, I'm hoping that I think it was Tech for Your Needs actually asked earlier in the week about net neutrality. So if anyone is not still really clear on what that means, because there's a lot of sort of gray areas and it's kind of tricky to explain. If you also check in the video description, I've created a playlist. It's got about 10 videos or so that will summarize what net neutrality is or was or should have been when we had it, and why you should be concerned about that, really, no matter who you are. I'll try to explain that myself. I want to make sure that at least the person who asked about that is here before I start talking about that, so we'll get into it a little bit later. But, you know, sad thing here is that in California, at least, we had the opportunity to do something about that, and that didn't happen. But I'm going to not skip to that topic right away. I did want to talk about this one quickly. This is Verizon and AT&T, and we have since learned that also Sprint and T-Mobile have said that they will, too, stop selling your information to data brokers, which is just a weird, creepy thing, right? And how did this all happen? Well, if you remember, about a month ago, we did a live stream where we talked about a company called Securus, I believe it was. And what they were doing is they were allowing correctional officers to go onto their website, have some sort of login, and then say, hey, we need to get this information about this specific cell phone number because we think that they're communicating with someone who is incarcerated. And that may or may not have been true, and that's one of the big problems with this. And beyond that, the company who was providing this information didn't really do their homework. They didn't investigate these documents that said, hey, we need to get this information. And I suppose one could argue that correctional officers are a part of law enforcement, but they're a different part of law enforcement in that they don't typically deal with citizens who are outside of the prison system. And that's another reason why I think everyone should have been concerned about this. And ultimately, the fact that when your carrier has your location information outside of emergency services or, legal investigations, without warrants or anything like that, that's your private information. Where you spend your time, where you go, who you're with, that kind of stuff, unless you're being investigated, it is really nobody's business unless you say, okay, I'm opting in, I'm okay with sharing this information. And that, as I understand this article, is the real problem here, is that a lot of people never gave that okay. They didn't say, yes, I'm fine with sharing my information. You can sell it to these advertising companies. I don't care. Most of the time people don't do that, although the fine print on a lot of these terms and conditions are difficult to, comb through and catch on to that stuff unless you are an attorney. So what happened here is that last month, a prison phone company, Securus, offers a service enabling law enforcement officers to locate most American cell phones within seconds. And again, this doesn't have to be someone who is a prisoner. It doesn't have to be someone who's being investigated. It could be any random person, as long as you log into the website and you have those credentials and you submit some sort of paperwork. They're like, okay, you give us a phone number, we'll tell you where that phone is located at right now. To access this private data, correctional officers simply visit Securus's web portal, enter any U.S. wireless phone number, and then upload a document purporting to be an official document giving permission to obtain real-time location data. This is Senator Wyden from, where's he from? I had his information here just a second ago. Senior officials from Securus have confirmed to my office that it never checks the legitimacy of those uploaded documents to determine whether they are in fact court orders, and has dismissed suggestions that it is obligated to do so. So the company that was providing this information said, it's not really our job to make sure that this stuff is legit. If somebody asks for location information, we're going to give it to them. And of course, the big problem here is that all four major carriers, I should say, within the US are doing business or have done business with this company. And of course, now that we don't have the same types of privacy protections that we did, about a year and a half ago, they are free to sell that information, apparently, to anyone who wants to pay for it. If you want to buy someone's browsing habits or their location data or anything about them, there's not really much in place to prevent that from happening. So, the fact that this was happening and someone had to point it out and say, hey, you guys really should stop doing this. And they said, oh, well, you're right. We probably should. Like I said, all four carriers came forward and said, yeah, we're going to stop. It's not okay. And I think that Sprint and T-Mobile took a little longer to respond, but eventually they did, which is good news. And surprise, surprise, here's a statement also from the same senator saying that the Federal Communications Commission is investigating the manner. I'm sorry, I'm skipped ahead here. The FCC is investigating the manner, and Wyden called on FCC Chairman Ajit Pai to recuse himself because he represented Securus as an attorney in 2012. What a surprise. This company that everyone has concerns about them invading privacy and not really doing things on the up and up. Guess who they were represented by just, 6 years ago? So big surprise there, right? And that is where the little thing I had, the little quote at the beginning of the video came from. Same senator says, Chairman Pai's total abandonment of his responsibility to protect American security shows that he can't be trusted to oversee an investigation into the shady companies that he used to represent. If your location information falls into the wrong hands, you or your children can be vulnerable to predators, thieves, and a whole host of people who could use that knowledge to malicious ends. And this is something that I think that anyone who says, something to the tune of, well, if you're not doing anything, you really don't have anything to worry about, right? Wrong. If this information gets into the wrong hands, and, especially when we're talking about children, when we talk about someone who's stalking their ex-husband or wife or boyfriend or girlfriend or maybe their crush or whatever, or has some sort of personal vendetta against another person, and they're able to access your location information, obviously that is a need for concern. So in any case, Verizon supposedly ending contracts with 2 different aggregators who get this information, and apparently we're selling it to whoever. That looks like it's going to be coming to an end, which is a good thing to hear, but crazy, that we still have to, I don't even want to say still have to worry about people invading your privacies and large corporations giving away your information. This is something that seems like it's happening more and more often. So as we move forward into or advance through the technological ages, I think that we're going to see many more laws that have to be put in place, to protect consumers and to protect people's privacy. So what's going on? Nate's Tech Services is with us this evening. I guess they will be jacking up their rates to make up for the revenue shortfall from the data brokers. Excellent point. And this is one of the things that I always question. Anytime there is something that we kind of see as a victory for consumers or for customers, and it's going to end up costing that company more money, it's not like they're going to pay the price out of their pockets, right? They're going to find a way to recoup those. And absolutely, I agree with your statement. However, I would say that if I had to choose, personally, if I had to choose between two things, someone not giving away my information and having to pay a higher rate, yeah, I think I'd have to go with the higher rate. No great answer there, right? Our Mike, how's it going? Good to see you. Rats scurred when the light shone brightly towards the ISP. Is every ISP in the States getting the Saints treatment by themselves? Hey, Johnny Chang, how are you? More business for VPNs. Yeah, and that's another thing. VPNs, also an interesting topic in and of itself, and something that I believe would be better to discuss with someone much more knowledgeable about that topic than myself, because I am certainly not the expert on VPNs. Where's my chat? There it is. So I'd like to get someone on here who understands it a little better. As far as I can tell, it sounds like VPNs can be a good idea, but as you start to look more in depth into each one of them, a lot of them seems to have their own challenges and problems and concerns, so at some point, I think it comes down to doing business with a company that you trust, which is a difficult thing to do, right? All right, so let's move on. I'm going to try to stay on schedule here. I do want to come back to net neutrality. And Mike, I was actually talking about you earlier this week because you had mentioned something to me on Twitter that we started to discuss, and I can't remember what it was. If you can remind me, I'll go back to that, because I know there was something that we were going to talk about. And actually, I'd mentioned that you had brought it up earlier. So California lawmakers accused of corruption after gutting net neutrality. Where'd my browser go? There it is. Yeah, so shocker. What happened here? California was looking like we were going to pass what would be the gold standard. Boy, all kinds of stuff is missing. I don't know what happened here. I need to do some quick fixes. Give me 1 second here. Let me see if I can get this thing going. I'm missing an entire little thing here, and it's probably going to be all out of shape. Oh yeah, it's all over the place. All right, let's see if we can fix this little box. Otherwise, we just have a black empty square of nothingness right there. So this is supposed to go. If you're listening to the podcast, I'm just fixing some technical issues here. I switched computers, and the solid state drive is cool, but man, let's see, I'm going to have to go full screen to resize this thing. OBS wants to pop things into the wrong spot, which is quite annoying. It's supposed to automatically make things go to the center, and that doesn't happen too often. And freehand in this thing, good luck. All right, I'm just going to leave it there instead of taking up too much more of our time messing with that. So what happened, as far as I can tell from the articles, not article, there are many articles about this. So I think when we start seeing alleged, we don't have to worry too much about accuracy here. The effort to pass a strong open internet law in California was killed off Wednesday morning by a handful of state legislators in a process described by many net neutrality advocates as corrupt and undemocratic. And this is Democratic Chairman Miguel Santiago. If you live in California, you might want to remember that name so that next time there's an election and you are curious about why net neutrality hasn't gotten anywhere so far in California, this may be the person that you want to think about, or if you're opposed to net neutrality, maybe you should vote for him. I leave that up to you. But we had something here that was going to be very close to the original net neutrality. Okay, I have a big black square here again. This is killing me. All right, whatever. Weird. So we had something that was very close to the 2015 Obama era net neutrality that was in place that we thought was going to pass in California. And apparently they changed a bunch of things here. It says 4 Democrats and 4 Republicans voted in favor of weakening amendments which offer gaping loopholes through which internet service providers could block web traffic and excise exorbitant fees. And if you were here Monday, you remember I mentioned this. There was a concern that something exactly like this might happen, and it did. Rather than watch his bill get mutilated, State Senator Scott Weiner attempted to withdraw SB 822 entirely. The committee passed it anyways. So screw you to the public and to anyone who cares about this, this whole thing. What happened today was outrageous, Weiner said in a statement. After the state passed SB 822 with strong net neutrality protections, the Assembly Committee forced hostile amendments into the bill before even holding a hearing. before taking any public comment, and only 12 hours after making those amendments public. And this is what's frustrating to me as a voter, is the fact that we often have laws that are, almost ready to be passed, and they look good, and at the last minute, it's usually at 10 o'clock in the evening or midnight, and they say, oh, we're going to tack on these extra few things, and, either you sign it or you don't, and if you don't, you'll be remembered as the congressperson who didn't, and they did this back in, okay, this square is driving me nuts. I'm just going to ignore that. So welcome to the big black emptiness right below me. I can't really do anything about that live. So what, oh, I know what it is. It's not looping. That's why. So back, if you're not familiar with this already, we had something called the Port Authority Act back in about 2006, I think it was, who, if I remember correctly, was kind of spearheaded by an assemblyman, I think it was from Kentucky or something like that. And what happened is that after 9/11, we've got all these different things passing, like the Patriot Act, and they had this other thing for the Port Authority Act to prevent things from getting into the country, blah, 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 right? Well, right before this thing was signed into law, they added on a section that says that you cannot have online gaming in any way, shape, or form, banking transactions that handle things like poker, which is something that a lot of us were participating in at that time. Those need to go. Like, you can't have that anymore. Well, no one in Congress is going to refuse to sign off on any sort of security laws, anything that's designed to protect the American people, which is what the majority of that law is about, the Port Authority Act. But they also tacked on this little thing that said, basically, we're not going to have internet poker anymore. We're getting rid of that. Two things that are, somewhat unrelated. And again, they wait till late at night for this to happen. A lot of people aren't even there to vote on it. And the ones that are know that if they vote against something like the Patriot Act or the Port Authority Act or anything like that that sounds very patriotic, it sounds like it's great for America, well, then you're going to be remembered as the person who was not patriotic or the person who didn't care about the safety of U.S. citizens. So they go, well, I guess we have to do it. And this drives me nuts. You come up with a law that has great ideas, and at the last minute you say, you know what, we're going to throw a bunch of other stuff in there that nobody really wants except for companies with lots of money to lobby to get this stuff passed, and then it goes through anyways. It's crazy. So something similar to this happened, and Santiago himself has received, listen to this one, the guy that I mentioned. This is let me go back here because I want people to know exactly who this is. This is Democratic Chairman Miguel Santiago, who has received more than $29,000 this election cycle, according to the article, from major telecom providers, including AT&T, Comcast, Verizon, and Sprint, among others, according to campaign finance records. And this is the thing that I like about that stuff having to be publicly accessible. $29,000 in this election cycle bought this guy off. From the way I interpret this article, he said 30 grand, $29,000, and yeah, we'll make sure that we don't get this bill passed the way that it was intended to, the way that these large telecom companies don't want to see it happen. That's it. That was the price on getting him to, not let this go forward or go forward in its original form. So in case you're in California and you're a registered voter, I hope that you'll remember that name and understand somewhat what happened here. Now, when it comes to, I want to finish this article and then talk a little bit more about net neutrality. Hey, Harvey, how are you doing? I know if I start talking about net neutrality, my bandwidth goes to zip. I know it seems like a crazy coincidence, right? I need to start putting code words in here. Filibustering, that's called the 11th hour decision. Thank you, Johnny Cheng. Private funding to politicians shall be unlawful in a real democracy. And unfortunately, we are not living in a real democracy by any means whatsoever, but I'll leave that to another live stream. So the BEAR rules themselves, for example, do not explicitly prohibit ISPs from charging unreasonable access fees. And this is good for anyone who's really still not clear on net neutrality. Unreasonable access fees on application and content providers in order to reach end users, nor do they prohibit ISPs from congesting web traffic at a point where data enters their network, a tactic that was employed by ISPs between 2013 and 2015 in attempts to exact fees from companies like Netflix and Cogent, fees that would have eventually been passed on to consumers. What's more, Santiago's amendments allow ISPs to zero rate their own content, enabling them to pick and choose which online services subscribers can use without impacting data limits. This could allow AT&T, for instance, to incentivize users to watch CNN, which AT&T now owns over competing networks. And this is where it gets not only frustrating, but also kind of scary. When you start controlling information, when you give people stuff for free and the alternative is you have to pay for it, then it's very easy for you to at least steer them in one particular direction, because we all make our decisions based on the information that is available to us. So if you take a percentage of the population who cannot afford to pay to access media sources that give them let's say, the other side of the story or another angle, and they're limited to, well, here's what's free. You can understand how over time people's opinions and their state of mind tends to be transformed or at least shaped by what this free information is telling them. And that's the sad thing about it. And I don't want to dig too deep into just net neutrality, but because someone had asked earlier in the week, please check the playlist that I put in the video description. I'm going to attempt to sort of summarize in a very short time interval what that means and why we should be concerned about it. So we have roads outside, and you can drive whatever the posted speed limit is on whatever road that you're driving on. Imagine if instead of being able to go from here to there, it would all depend on who you are. You know, if you are average citizen who makes X, you know, let's say your income is $30,000 a year, well, you get to drive in the 35-mile-an-hour lane. And if someone else makes, I don't know, six figures, they get to drive in the 65-mile-an-hour lane. And let's say that someone who is in the, you know, the top, I don't know, 5% and is making several $100,000 a year, they're allowed to drive in a lane where they can do 80 miles an hour, right? So they reach their destination faster. What's wrong with that? All of us are spending tax money to build these roads. And at this point in time, we all have equal access. We can drive wherever we want, when we want. But once you start changing that and giving special privileges, which is exactly what ISPs will be allowed to do now that there's no net neutrality, they could say that if you want to access YouTube, for example, now you have to pay for the YouTube access package. Just like you have a cable TV package, you could have an internet package where here's what you get by default for your $75 a month you're paying right now. You get a browser, you get email, and if you want to stream video, that's a $5 upgrade. Oh, and if you want to visit these certain particular sites that your ISP doesn't get advertising dollars from, now you have to pay a little extra money to get there. So, you know, it's obvious why that would be a problem and why we have liked the idea of the internet being neutral. You know, as far as accessing data, we pay for our access, we pay for the speed that we get, but no one tells us where we can go, what we can watch, what we can download, what we can upload, you know, up until now. And that is what is in danger since we don't have net neutrality anymore. And if you think of it on a platform like YouTube, what if tomorrow YouTube said, oh, you want to create a channel? You want to be a YouTube publisher? That's great. Here's the thing. You're going to have to pay an extra $200 a month to get your YouTube channel started. Some people would be okay with that. Some people would say, hey, fine, I've got $200, no problem. My channel's going to make lots of money. I'm going to be selling a product. I'm going to earn ad revenue. That's cool. But right now, you don't need any of that. All you need is a camera and an internet connection, and you can create a YouTube channel. That's it. That's what's great about the internet. Everyone can get on it. You know, if you have the hardware, if you have the connection, and you can pay for an internet, you know, for an ISP to connect you to the internet, you can do whatever you want, wherever you want. And that is something that has been protected. You know, there's one of the reasons that net neutrality was put into place to keep things that way. So without those protections, although we've been reassured that, you know, nobody's going to throttle anything, you know, nobody's going to try to offer a competing service and make you pay extra to get Netflix, even though you're paying Netflix $10 a month or whatever it is. but we still need to get rid of net neutrality because that would allow us to charge extra for that, but we're not going to do that. So if you want to take their word for it, fine. Again, I don't do the best job of describing that, so please take a look at that playlist down below, and hopefully it will give you a better explanation. Let's see. Let's move on to, in my parents' home country, the government hires local thugs to sway unpopular opinions. Don't even get me started. All right, so here's some cool stuff. If you haven't heard of Oppo, this company apparently is owned by or affiliated with OnePlus, and they have come out with something that I think looked pretty cool. Although if you read any articles, it's interesting. If you read any articles written by anyone who is an Apple enthusiast, they make this phone sound like it's the worst thing in the world, but that's nothing new, right? So can we just take a look at something new and just have kind of a neutral stance and say, hey, let's check out what we like about it, what we don't like about it, and not automatically compare it to the latest Samsung or Apple device? Can we just look at it on its own? Probably not. Okay, so compare away if you like. So this thing is interesting. And, you know, originally, and to this day, I would say that if we design a phone that has moving parts, if anything is going to go wrong traditionally or historically with electronics, that's where it's going to fail. If you've got moving parts, that's usually the first thing to wear out. Now, I would assume, one, that this company has done their research and figured out a way to make this thing last, because what happens is the entire phone slides open in order to expose the camera. I would like to show this video. I think I can probably just skip to a spot in it. I know that, of course, we're going to get an ad, so we'll come back to that. So this phone is going to have the section on the back slide up, or the front slide down, so it exposes the camera, front-facing camera at the top, and the sensor for the Face ID. It will not have a fingerprint scanner embedded into the screen or anywhere else on the phone, but what it will do is it will open up within half a second. So this is the first time, you know, other than the Vivo that we saw with the pop-up camera on the top, this is the first phone that I've seen so far that has a moving part that opens up so that you can expose the front-facing camera and the, where are we at here? And the hardware for Face ID. Yeah, I think if I play this, I'm going to get in trouble with YouTube, so I don't want to do that. There is a video here on someone's channel. Oh, it's on The Verge. So if you want to check this out, they've got a video of this on The Verge. The Oppo Find X looks kind of cool, I gotta say. It is similar to the Galaxy S9 Plus. It has curved sides and rounded corners. The display is a vibrant OLED panel with 1080 pixel wide resolution, and both the front and back of the phone feature curved glass. So in all, it looks like a pretty sexy phone. And you can, oh, here you can see. So if I do this, you can see, that's a GIF image, I guess. So this thing pops up so you can get your front-facing camera, and then it goes away. Best of all, no notch. I know that a lot of people don't care about the notch. It's certainly not high on my list of concerns, but if I was able to choose between a notch and no notch, I think I'm going with no notch. And I like that this company is doing something that we can truly call innovation. I mean, this is something that might actually catch on now. Yes, concerns about the moving parts and concerns about a few other things here. Oh, and by the way, did I mention no camera bump, which I think is incredibly cool. It also means there's no camera bump at all on the back of the phone, so it sits flush on a table and doesn't rock awkwardly, which is something that makes me insane about any phone that has a camera bump on the back. The Find X does not have any sort of fingerprint authentication system, which personally I'm okay with, but I think that might be a negative for a lot of people. More and more customers that I talk to not really loving the Face ID and kind of wishing that they had Touch ID back on their phone, or had Touch ID at all, because it's so much easier to operate. But I'm sure there's a percentage of the population out there who loves Face ID. So that is what it is. Turn on the phone, swipe up on the lock screen, and the top of the phone will motor up, authenticate your face, and unlock the phone, as I mentioned, within about a half a second. So on the first release of this thing, or the prototype anyways, we're talking about half a second to open up the camera, which is probably faster than you could open up the camera app on any phone at this point in time. And I would suspect that, if there is a next generation of this phone, it's going to move even faster. And if other manufacturers adopt similar technology, then they'll go even faster and faster. And pretty soon your phone will open up like that. Now, the other thing about this is we have to be concerned about the IP rating, which is a big deal to some people. I still recommend you keep your phone away from water, but for people who are really concerned about moisture being an issue, this is going to be an area where this phone may have some problems there. The Oppo company should have named that phone the Find V instead of the Find X in honor to the famous blue pill. That's funny. My girlfriend actually said something similar to that. It looks like it'll be a nightmare to repair. It may indeed, Harvey. And you know, what's funny is a lot of people ask about, like, what is the most difficult phone you've ever worked on? And my go-to used to always be the HTC One M7, which to this day just bugs me because people will continue to comment on all sorts of channels about how easy it is to open that phone up if you don't, if you know what you're doing. And the real answer is, if it's been opened up before, or it's a refurbished model, yes, super easy to open, but the first time, not so easy. In fact, we had a $1,000 bounty at one time for everyone who was saying they could do that on a brand new unopened phone, and nobody won that bounty. But I digress. Since then, I kind of thought back a little ways, and if you haven't already done this before, probably one of the most difficult phones I can think of as far as working on it to service the screen, which, as we know, is the #1 thing that goes wrong on phones, that would be the G1. So another HTC phone, but the very first Android phone with that weird slider that kind of went up and over. So instead of the phone just sliding open, it kind of went like this. It had like a little weird mechanism inside it. That thing was a freaking nightmare to repair because you had to, like many phones, go through the back, disassemble everything, including that sliding mechanism, just to get to the display on the front. And if I remember correctly, you had to pretty much fully assemble the phone in order to test it and make sure it was working. So if you got a bad screen or something wasn't put together properly, you got to go through the whole process all over again. This one might be very much like that. And here's the other negative here. They're talking about this phone costing over $1,000, which obviously is going to be prohibitive to a lot of people who might otherwise consider it. The good news, it will be making its way to North America, unlike a lot of other Chinese phones, at least as far as we know. Let's talk about some specs here real quick. We have the Qualcomm Snapdragon 845 processor, 8 gigs of RAM, and up to 256 gigabytes of storage. I am a fan of. I know a lot of people are doing everything on the cloud, but I prefer to be able to store my videos on my phone so I can get to them right away when I'm making videos and everything else. Best thing of all here, it is a 37, let's say this in a way that everyone can, if you're not reading this, it makes sense. 3,730 milliamp hour battery, with Oppo's VOOC fast wired charging that's similar to the OnePlus Dash Charge, which I believe in this article they say gives you a 100% charge in about 35 minutes. That is something to be excited about. Having to worry about your phone, charge for an hour and a half, 2 hours, or anything like that. This, I think, could really set it apart, having that fast charging system built in. It's running Android 8.1 Oreo out of the box with Oppo's Color OS customization. It borrows a lot of ideas from iOS and Samsung's spin on Android, and nowadays it looks like everyone is being influenced by everyone else's brand. So, that is something we're going to see a lot more of. It won't be familiar to anyone used to a Pixel device, but it's not the worst Android interface I've ever used. Okay, that is obviously from the writer of the article. Global LTE compatible is important because Oppo says this will be its first phone sold in North America and Europe, so that's cool. Love to see more competition and more options coming to the US, hopefully. Are motorized camera assemblies the key to a notch-free future? And this is me quoting the author of the article. I'm not so sure. There are new compromises to make with the Find X, such as a lack of water resistance, fair enough, and a motorized system that is more susceptible to damage. Okay, both good points here. I want to add to that, when you talk about a $1,000 plus or $1,000 plus price point, that is going to be something that makes people think twice. And as far as this motor wearing out, my guess is that the way that most manufacturers look at phones nowadays is that they are designed to last throughout the warranty period, at best a year and a half to 2 years, and then you're expected to upgrade. So long term, absolutely, something like this would wear out, but I would question whether or not that time will come before the phone itself is obsolete, because the way that we see upgrades and faster processors and newer technology happening in this particular category, it's like most people's phones are outdated within 6 months. You know, whatever you bought at the beginning of the year, there's already something better, faster, cooler, trendier. So, you know, at the very least, we see a lot of people are upgrading their phones, you know, every year to year and a half at the most. So I don't think that in the short term that's probably going to be as big of a deal as we might have concern for. But the fact that it moves, you know, if something falls and gets trapped inside there, obviously that's going to be a problem. But we've had volume rockers and home buttons and power buttons and all sorts of physical movement on phones for a long time. Again, going all the way back to not just the G1, but, you know, old flip phones and sliders and all sorts of other variations. So I don't know if really we would have to be concerned about that. I think that the price point might be the thing that discourages people from a brand that is as of yet unproven, at least within the US market and apparently within the European market as well. So that could be a negative, but I'm kind of excited to see something that is really different and, you know, really takes advantage of that entire area on the front of the screen, because that is the big deal nowadays. People want lots and lots of room to watch their videos and read stuff with. Hey, John Cassidy, how's it going? Let me scroll back up here on the comments. I might have missed a few. Today is summer solstice. I did not know that. Speed throttling is unnecessary in today's infrastructures. If they start imposing draconian rules in the cornerstone of today's communication, such as the web, then we go as in the dark web. And yeah, and in fact, they have been caught doing just that. You know, we talked about this earlier in the week on Monday, where Comcast, I believe it was, had done away with the throttling system like for over a year now, because they just don't need it. You don't have to throttle these customers who are using lots of bandwidth, because the bandwidth is there. And they said, yeah, we don't need it anymore. We'll shut it down. But we'll continue to charge you for using more data, the way I understand it. So yeah, it is, for the most part, unnecessary. The phone looks like it'll be a nightmare to repair. Said that. Okay. Let's see. The most outstanding feature is the face scanning and an emoji that is almost a clone of the iPhone 10. Motorized, first thing that will go, probably self-destruct countdown timer starts when you buy a new phone. And you know, that's the only thing. I would think that, sure, people use their phones a lot, you know, use their cameras a lot. But if this thing has to open to authenticate your face every time, then that would be a problem, right? But if I read it correctly, you can just swipe up and open it. So I'm sure you could turn that feature on or off at your own desire. Let's see. Do they include an emergency eject pin just in case something gets jammed? I would doubt it. I wonder how long until the mechanism gets clogged with hair and debris. You would hope that A, they've thought that through, and B, there should be a way to clean that, you know, so that the dirt and debris doesn't go down inside the phone. It probably accumulates on the outside, and when it doesn't slide all the way shut, I would think you get a warning that says you need to wipe that area out. I don't really know, you know, we're just seeing the preview here, but anything is possible. I don't get why they would even make it if they would be so expensive to sell, because this is a Chinese company, and don't most people in China not buy iPhones because they like cheaper phones? And, you know, that was my understanding, John. And after talking to Scotty Allen, who's actually in China, you know, and looking at some other statistics, it appears as if iPhones are becoming more and more popular in the Chinese market. And in fact, we've been told that that's really Apple's next biggest area for growth, is selling in China. So I don't know. We do know that wealth on the average is increasing in China. And we also know that President Trump has recently stated that Apple will not be stuck with these tariffs that all these other companies are. So whether or not that will affect selling prices over there, I don't know. To have a $1,000 phone anywhere, to me, you know, blows my mind. But I suppose there's a customer for each and every little thing that people think up. Speaking of, Apple has been fined $6.6 million after iPhones and iPads stopped working because they had third-party parts. If you don't know this story, let's try to go through this real quick. So Apple has built security into the fingerprint scanner on their iPhones since the iPhone 5S. And what we saw a couple years ago is that people would go get the home button replaced on their iPhone 6 and everything would be great, except that the fingerprint scanner doesn't work anymore. And the fingerprint scanner doesn't work when you replace it because that is one of the security features built into the iPhone. So the fingerprint scanner and the logic board have to match. If you separate those two, no more fingerprint scanner. Apple's statement is that it's more secure to store that information in an enclave that's attached to the home button instead of building it into the logic board. I'm not sure why that is. Certainly beyond my engineering knowledge there, but somehow Samsung was able to build the Galaxy S5 and forward with a fingerprint scanner that you could replace because the security was actually built onto the motherboard of the phone. So why Apple chose to do that, I'm not sure. But what we do know is that the way that they went about this was kind of goofy. If you replace the fingerprint scanner for any reason on an iPhone 6, everything was fine. You just didn't have fingerprint scanning capability until you went to restore the phone or upgrade the software, at which time you got something called Error 53, which rendered the phone useless. In other words, it was bricked. You're done. You can't use it anymore because we're protecting your security. Okay, fair enough. So I go and get my phone fixed, and I'm out on vacation, 100 miles from the nearest Apple store or from the nearest repair store, and I get an over-the-air update, which everyone, almost automatically does. When you see an update, you click update. Yes, of course I want to update. I want my phone to be on the latest firmware. And when you do that, if you've had your home button replaced, your phone doesn't work anymore. You're done. So regardless of where you're at, you're still able to access the update over the air, but when you go to use the phone, it doesn't work anymore. And guess what? No one can fix it at that period in time. Okay, we're talking about 2 years ago. No one can fix that problem except the Apple Store because they have a special machine that matches up the fingerprint scanner replacement to the logic board. So apparently a lot of people went to Apple at that time, allegedly, and Apple said, oh, I'm sorry, someone else worked on your phone, put in a different home button, and we can't help you anymore. So why don't you just get another phone, or there's the door, in not so many words. So it doesn't seem like this would ever be a good idea. Even if you were opposed to having people get their phones repaired by a third party, I can understand that. It's in Apple's best interest to not let anybody have any profit from anything that they manufacture except them. I understand that. That is what businesses tend to do. Okay, now obviously they can't lock everyone out of the game, but if you're a business and your goal is to generate profit, you're going to do everything you can to get the customer's money to come to your company, right? When you get that big. Now, a lot of small businesses, on the other hand, want to do what's in the customer's best interest because we build these relationships on a personal level. When you're a huge corporation, you can't get too friendly with your customers because your board of directors isn't there in the store. All you can do is issue these orders from corporate and they go down to the employees, and the employees have to do what they're told, which is why I rarely, if ever, fault an employee of a large corporation for an action that they take when it's part of their company's policies. These orders come from people that say, if you want to keep your job, here's what you have to do. Well, when you tell your customers to take a hike because they chose to get their screen replaced or their home button or whatever replaced by another company, that doesn't sound like it's good for business. So an Australian court has ruled that Apple gets to pay $6.6 million because at the time they told their customers, yeah, your option is to get another phone and we can't help you. A simple fix that I'm sure would take 10 minutes on their Horizon machine if they popped open the screen, replaced the home button, plugged it in and synced them up, done. Would have been finished. They could have charged the customer 50, 75, whatever they thought was fair price for replacing that home button and matching it back up to the logic board. And instead, according to the articles, lots of articles, they told their customers, sorry, tough luck. You should never go anywhere but to Apple if you need anything for your Apple product, which is crazy, just insanity. It's one thing to try to earn profit. It's another thing to manipulate people into giving you all of their money out of, nothing really outside of greed. So an Australian court has fined Apple $9 million, which is about $6.6 million in US, for its refusal to fix iPhones and iPads that had previously been repaired with third-party parts. Users reached out to Apple for help when their phones were bricked by Error 53. A lot of us are already familiar with that. I started to make a video about Error 53 about 2 years ago, and ironically, my power went out in the middle of that video. And one of these days, I'll put this on here as like an outtake, guys. I have 75% of the video that I was making, and no joke, my power went out in my house in the middle of that Error 53 video. It was quite frustrating. So Apple says it misled at least 275 Australian customers whose devices were affected by telling them they were not eligible for repairs. The company has since reached out to 5,000 affected customers, according to Australia's Competition and Consumer Commission, which I think is fair. They certainly should be paying the equivalent of what the cost was for those customers, and they should certainly be should have the understanding that this is not okay. You don't just tell a customer to take a hike because they did something that is not in your company's best interest for profit. That's insane, especially when you're dropping like $1,000 or more on a phone these days. 6.6 billions? No, 6.6 million. I wish it was billion. Let me back up here. I missed a bunch of comments again. Let's see. Do you think? Bear with me, folks. I get lost on the... where's 1001 noisy cameras to put my titles up here? Repair parts from China will probably get hit by tariffs. I agree. The problem is I don't think Apple will care because $6.6 million is nothing to them. I agree that $6.6 million is nothing to them, John. I question whether or not they will care. And I don't even know if it's the money that they'll care about as much as the fact that when you have some sort of court, you have a ruling like this that goes against a company. Number one, there is monetary compensation involved, and I've heard more than one person, including Louis Rossmans. I saw his video where he talked about this, and I understand the angle that, well, it's $6.6 million. That's nothing to Apple. Big deal. That's not really going to teach them a lesson. But I think we have to remember that Apple is a company that is heavily involved in litigation of all sorts. So when they see that a court is willing to rule against them and say that, you know what, if you're doing something that's not in the best interest of customers, that may come back to bite you later on. Hopefully, Apple's lawyers are wise enough to say we need to rethink our policy in these types of situations, because even though this is an Australian court, typically in the US, the way that it works is once there is a court ruling, future cases will refer back to that ruling and say, well, in the case of, Australia versus Apple or whatever name was on this case, here's how they ruled. And a lot of judges and a lot of, people who are involved in the decision-making process will say, well, this is very similar to that, and that will influence the outcome of those future cases, number one. Secondly, when it comes to this not being a lot of money for Apple, okay, fair point. And at the same time, are we going to determine, how much a fine is based on how much money you make? So if you get a parking ticket and someone who has little to no money or someone who has lots of money gets that same sort of ticket or gets that same sort of violation or same sort of court ruling against them, should we decide the penalty based on the total assets that that person or company has access to or owns? Is that fair also? I don't know. I understand, point taken, it's not a lot of money to Apple, but at least it's telling Apple, hey, when it comes to Australia anyways, you can't do that. That's not okay. And hopefully other courts will see things the same way and say, you know what? This is what Australia said, and this is what Apple did, and I think that it's fair that we do the same thing. That's just my theory. I could be way off on that. 6.6 billion would be better, but again, do we really want to make people... Do we want a level playing field when it comes to lawsuits? Do you sue according to the amount of damage that someone caused, or do you sue according to the amount of money that that person has? And it's probably the latter in many cases, but I'm not sure that that's fair. Up for debate on that one, totally. Apple have more than half of the revenue from China. Let's see. Let me scroll down here. But Apple said that the fingerprint is stored in the coprocessor, so it's lying for them to say it's stored in both when originally they said it was stored in the M7 and newer coprocessor. I didn't know that. My understanding is the secure enclave in the fingerprint scanner is tied to the logic board, but there's probably something on either end of that, I would imagine. They're not too public about how that works, right? The problem is the 6.6 million fine is a drop in the bucket. Yep. And that is the max. Yeah, that was the thing, right? That's the maximum that's allowed by Australian law. So what do you do? Change the law so that people can sue for more money, maybe? Let's see, it's modularized. The thing is, if you are without the use of the phone in the middle of nowhere and no need to use the phone, you are SOL. And that was the thing about this case. And this was one of the points that I brought up. Guys, I'm going to do this as an outtake because I seriously have, I want to say at least 20 minutes of me going on about Error 53 with what I thought were good points that would say, you know, that would communicate and make it easy for people to understand why this was a terrible thing for Apple to do to their customers. And when the end of the video got cut off, I didn't have electricity, so I kind of left that one on the shelf. But maybe I'll bring that out just for fun. Yeah. So if you go to update your phone, and you know, worst case scenario, there is a medical emergency, or you need to report a crime, or you know, who knows what? Someone's giving birth, and you have to call an ambulance to come in, and your phone just turns into a brick. Not when the repair is done. This was the real problem with it. The phone didn't start to malfunction when you got the button replaced. That I could understand. You know, Apple sabotages their equipment, and if anyone tampers with it, it doesn't work anymore. I don't like that idea, but it would make more sense than saying, allow the phone to continue working until they update the software. Then it's bricked. You know, then you're away from the repair center. You're away from your original home button that somebody had removed from the phone, and now your phone just doesn't work anymore. That was the big problem with that one. In fact, I had someone, I want to say, I had read a comment from someone who was in Libya or something like that. I don't know if they're stationed in the military or what, but he's like, there is no Apple store. You know, I can't just go to an Apple store. My phone's dead. I don't have a phone anymore. It's crazy. It sets a precedent. Yes, that is the thank you, Johnny. That's you put into words what I was trying to get across. It sets a precedent in litigation. That is the importance from a minor case. Yeah, so small amount of money, but people can refer back to this and say, this is what happened last time you guys tried this one. This thing is, some corporations take fines as a cost of doing business. Yeah, that's true. What can we do? You know, as long as they have lots of money. It's certainly not fair, but it seems to be the way things are working right now, even if you're an ISP. 11 minutes to go. Thanks, Johnny. I need to get on here. I've got 2 more topics to run through here real quick. The only problem is that people that don't need a new phone won't be able to get one. There are other companies, though Australia has more phones than Apple phones. Oh, interesting. I think Paul Daniels published a video that mentioned the latest iOS update fixed some of those errors. But the iPhone isn't a phone. It's a multimedia device. Fair enough. Why you can't trust negative online reviews. Since we're down to just a few minutes, I'll get through this as quickly as possible. Friends, I'm going to put a card. Let's see, it's up. I will put a card way up there in the corner somewhere. It's going to be way off away from where I'm at that you can click on with my 10 things you should know about Yelp. And it's not just Yelp. It's Google reviews. It's TripAdvisor. It's Amazon reviews. It's every review site you can think of. Here's the big problem with those, and why you should be skeptical about negative reviews in particular. And that is because, look, listen to this. This is a review of the Great Wall of China, okay? One of the 7 wonders of the world here. This is someone writing a review about the Great Wall of China, which ended up with a score of 4.2 stars. Not very big, or I'm sorry, not very tall or big, just saying. I kind of liked it, sort of. This is the Great Wall of China. Wrote one ambivalent visitor of the structure which stretches thousands of miles. Another complained, I don't see the hype in this place. It's really run down and old. Why wouldn't you update something like this? No USB plugins or outlets anywhere. I'm concerned about people. I really am. Someone else announced that he's not a wall guy. Lame. The Great Wall of China. Okay, so this is obviously one very extreme example, but here's the problem. A lot of the people who write online reviews, in particular negative ones, have a... where's my full article at? Why'd you cut me off here? they have a couple things going for them that we should be concerned about, and the main one is their agenda. When you think about people who are writing online reviews, in many cases they are ordering unusual items in weird sizes. Very few people write reviews. It's about 1.5% according to this article, or 15 people out of 1,000. Should we be relying on these people if we're part of the other 985? And one thing is for sure, if someone wants free stuff, or they feel like they didn't have the red carpet rolled out for them, or maybe they have a competing business, or whatever else, you name it, they are going to be far more motivated to write a review, especially a negative one, for the wrong reasons. Reasons that we can't really trust. I will add on top of that, the thing that I always say, and that is the problem with polls is they are limited to people who have the time to invest in participating in them. And the same thing is true of reviews. Most of us don't take the time to write a review because we have better things to do. However, a lot of us still look at these reviews in order to make our buying decisions. And I can tell you right now, the number of companies that have approached me and tried to get me to endorse their product without disclosing the fact that they provided it or that they're providing compensation for that product is crazy. The way that they try to do it, and I'm sure it would be easy enough for them to throw in something like, hey, if you write a negative review of whatever this product is, it's going to benefit you in some way. So one of the problems is, and I'll say that I'm guilty of this, when I look at a product that has, a 4.9 out of 5-star rating, one of the first things I do is look at the negative reviews and see what they're complaining about. Because if someone didn't like this, what was the problem they had with it, and would I have the same problem? And to be realistic, not a great way to go about looking at reviews. Obviously, it's a good thing to have one out there. I'm going to give anyone out there who's listening a $1 million idea right now. I've had this for a long time. I haven't acted on it, and we all come up with these, right? What's a $1 million application idea that you could build for a phone or tablet and would absolutely be huge? People will be installing it. You could sell advertising. You could sell it for 99 cents per download, whatever you want to do. Forget about Yelp, forget about Google reviews, forget about Amazon reviews, and create an application that is limited to people that you know. So let's say all of you guys on this channel had the same application that I have, and I can add you as one of my friends. I've got Greg M, Harvey, Johnny Chang, Real World Reviews. I've got everyone in this conversation on my application, and the only reviews that I see come from you. They come from my friends. They come from my family. They don't come from any of these strangers that I have no idea who they are, and they're writing reviews for who knows what reason. Half of them are businesses posing to be someone else's business to hurt the other guy who's competing with them. If you could limit the review process or the review application to people that you know and trust, how much more accuracy would you have when you try to make a buying decision or decide where to eat, or just, you're looking at cars or whatever it is? That's my $1 million application idea. If somebody makes that, you can tell them they heard it here first. I don't expect a huge royalty, but if you want to kick down a percentage, that would be cool. Why you really can't trust reviews should be the real title. Contradicts the purpose of my channel, though. Hey, well, that's the thing. We try to make these as unbiased as possible, right? And I trust that you do the same thing. I can't speak for everyone else. If someone's a stranger off the street, I don't know what motivates them to write a review. Therefore, I don't put a lot of credibility into something that I read that's written by a total stranger, especially having been involved in businesses who were victimized by people who wanted to hurt them in one way or another, just for whatever reason, for no good reason other than that. They wanted something free, they have a competing business, or they didn't like the way that you looked at them or talked to them, or they thought they were entitled to something that they weren't. It's ridiculous. Ignore one-sentence reviews. Read the ones that are properly formatted and lengthy. I would add to that, ignore 1-star and 5-star reviews. The majority of those are not legitimate, in my experience. On Amazon, I only look at verified purchasers. And I could tell you something about that, Greg M, but I won't tell you right here on YouTube. I won't state it publicly, but don't always assume that verified purchase means anything, or that person wasn't compensated for that purchase. That's all I'm going to say. An app to make friends and help people. There you go. I'm telling you guys, it could be huge. If you know how to do it, That's a moneymaker right there. Okay, last one, and then I'll let you go. Apple, Samsung, and LG back plans to replace car keys with smartphones. What do you think? Is this a good idea? I'm going to say right now that where I live, we have bridge tolls, and we have this little box called Fast Track, and you put it up on your windshield, and it lets you get, you don't have to stop at the toll booth, which in a way I don't care for because it's eliminating jobs right off the bat, which I'm not, really in favor of. And it really doesn't get you through the booth. Everyone has Fast Track now, so you don't save a ton of time by using it. Half the time the Fast Track lane is jammed up anyways. But my question is this: why do we have to have an extra little box to carry around in order to pay our bridge toll with a sensor that's, put up on top there? Why is that not built into your phone already? Well, if you could unlock, start, and drive your car with something that was built into your phone, that might solve a problem that, one less thing to carry in your pocket. And I have a couple questions about this. The first thing obviously would be security. If someone steals your phone, now they've pretty much stolen your car. I would assume that the feature would be disabled unless you unlock the phone. So that would be a good reason to have a passcode or a fingerprint scanner or Face ID or something like that on your phone. According to the article, the first version of the application will require dealers to transfer ownership of the digital key to smartphones, after which owners will be able to do everything they can currently do with the physical key. My question is this: will you be able to duplicate it? Because one thing that makes me insane right now is that all these cars that have side cut keys or key fobs or anything like that, and half the time you go to a dealer, if you're buying a used car, you're definitely not getting 2 key fobs. You're definitely not getting 2 side cut keys. That's on you to go buy that, which is crazy. Some of these things can be $200, $300 to duplicate, which is insane. My very first question, and I'm in favor of this, I'd love to have my car key built into my phone. That would be awesome, unless you break the phone, because then I guess you don't have the car, because it operates on NFC. Now, that's another thing to consider. If you don't have a hard, what I would call a hard copy of your key, and your phone stops working, then you would definitely want to have a spare on hand, right? So do you get to duplicate that key that's built into your phone onto another device just in case? Because that would be a great thing. I would guess probably no. They will almost definitely say, oh, if you want to get another one, it'll only cost you so much to install it on a second phone. So I hope I'm wrong about that. Otherwise, personally, I'd be in favor of it. Again, in the article, using smartphones to unlock and start cars is not a new suggestion, but the exciting thing here is the standardization, which would make it much more popular and cheaper. Tesla currently allows owners to use their smartphone as a digital key, while other car companies like Volvo currently offer apps that can lock, unlock, and remote start vehicles but not drive them. That's kind of interesting. So, yeah, I'm curious to see what you guys think about this, because right off the top of my head, it sounds like a good thing. The concern, of course, would be that, how difficult is it going to be to get a spare key? Because it's one thing to lose your key, but there are a number of things that can go wrong with the phone. And if your phone is disabled for any reason, I assume that includes the battery dying. Obviously, it includes the battery dying. No NFC, no way to unlock the car, no way to start the car. So that could be bad news. You'd certainly want to have some sort of backup. Are they going to charge you for that? My guess is yes, and that would be unfortunate, because it wouldn't cost them anything to allow you to duplicate this wireless key, but I have a feeling that they will. So I am curious to see what you guys think about this. No more key fobs, maybe. Keyless entry with your phone, sounds like Tesla Model 3, yep. I live in New York, and they got rid of the tolls in general, and now you just drive through without stopping, and cameras take a photo of your license plate and just mail you the bill. That's interesting, because we have cameras here that do the same thing, but the main reason the cameras are in place is to make sure that if your little sensor didn't go off, they know who it was who was going through the bridge, and then they send you a bill. I don't know why we haven't gotten rid of the sensor altogether so far. That would make sense, but I would assume there's a decent amount of processing power. Well, I suppose it's not a big deal now, where they have to figure out whose license plate is what. How can we borrow our car to a friend? Yeah, how would you let your friend drive your car without giving them your phone? That is a good question. See, I like this. These are the things that I always want to, right off the top of my head, I think of a couple, but I had a feeling there was some things I wasn't considering, and that's one of them. How would you loan your car out? You'd have to loan your phone too, right? People forget their 4-digit passcode. I doubt this will be a flawless feature. Yeah, that would be trouble. If you forget your passcode and you can't start your car, that would be rough. Let's see. Spare keys are generally areas you hit with a credit card sized NFC card. Valet parking key. Yeah. So that is my real concern. I'm looking at making a duplicate key for one car right now, which is going to cost about, I don't know, 50, 75 bucks. And this is nothing electronic built into the key. It's just a plain key, but it's cut from the side. And most key makers don't deal with that type of duplication. Apparently there's one place that does. They charge you a premium to do it. I'm going to do that. But on my girlfriend's car, she's got all the remote and the electronics built into the key itself. And I want to say this thing is going to be like $150, $175 to duplicate, which is just crazy to me. And I kind of understand why, but I have a feeling they're really taking advantage of the fact that this is new technology. Most key duplication services don't handle those, so we are going to charge you lots of money for it, which is unfortunate. These have used RFID extenders to capture the frequency of key fobs and transmit that to the car. Open the car and starting it. Yeah, and I'm sure this will be another thing that we have to watch out for, right? And it would be more high-tech ways to steal cars once you have wireless starting ability built into it. And this is something that we're already looking at. You know, there are cars out there that people can hijack and change all sorts of things, including your braking and acceleration remotely, you know, smart cars. So that's already kind of a crazy thing. Speaking about RFIDs and NFCs, the Strange Parts channel started dissecting them. Oh, cool. I'll have to check that out, Johnny. I have to check in with Scotty. One of these days, we're going to have him come back on again. That is about everything I had for this evening. Thanks, everyone, as usual, for joining me. I'm going to hang out in the chat for about another 5 minutes or so, and then I'm going to be out of here. I'll be back again Monday at 2 p.m. And, of course, on how is it next Thursday at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. How is it that we have so many people in the chat and my stats say that there are 2 people watching? I don't understand that. This thing must be lagging or something. Anyhow, I will get back to work now and let you guys get to what it is you're doing, guys and gals, and I will talk to you next time.